So I just want to invite you into this image that we have up here. It's an image that kind of holds me, I guess. It's a photo I took during an 8-day silent retreat that I did. No talking for 8 days, keeping your mouth shut. No talking and no eye contact with a group of people for 8 days. Very powerful experience in the Ignatian tradition, in the tradition of the spiritual direction tradition of Ignatius of Loyola, a 500-year-long tradition of spiritual direction. Very wonderful experience that I'm very grateful for. And in this, there's a lot of things I like about this image. It's an image that kind of evokes for me my own spiritual journey, you know? And I hope it will for you too. And there's a few things about it that do that for me. Twists and turns, you know? It's not a straight path. I don't know if any of us have a straight path to enlightenment or whatever it is we're after, a straight path to God. There's some things we can't see. We can't see the ending exactly. Yeah. So I just invite you to be in your own journey. And out of that, I want to, of course this morning I'm sharing a lot about my journey through songs and stories, and I just want to invite you to be in yours. And this is something I've been working on in a public way for a long time, and I've come to some convictions about it. And one of those convictions about our spiritual journeys is that personal transformation is the purpose of everything we do in spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is not where I think a lot of us Christians go first. You know, we go to prayer and worship. Those are all very spiritual things. What has become more and more important for me in the midst of that is personal practice. Practicing, like literally practicing like an instrument every day, the way of being I aspire to in the world. To me, that's what personal practice, that's what spiritual practice is. And the purpose of it is transformation, because we don't start at the end of the journey, do we? We start in a place where there can be a lot of fear, a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty, a lot of challenge. We don't start in that place of full embodiment of the spiritual capabilities that we know we're capable of. We know we're capable of radical forgiveness and inclusion and love and all those things that we know are there for us spiritually, but we have personal work to do, often ourselves and in our communities, to really get there. And so I want to just use this space here to talk about 4 points in that journey. May I step up here? The first point is, this is kind of where a lot of our spiritual journeys start, is with what I call spiritual experience. We meet God, or we meet Christ, or we have an experience of the divine, or a bear goes through our yard, or something like that. And it takes us somewhere spiritually that we were probably not expecting to go. We have that spiritual experience. Or it could be that we long for that encounter and it doesn't come. Or we have a breakdown or a job loss or a breakup of a relationship or some sort of limit experience, some sort of hurt experience that sends us out looking for those spiritual resources that we know are there for us, but we want to connect with them more. And I call that coming out of that spiritual experience, it sends us on what I call a quest. You know, we want to know, why did God come and put his hand through my ribcage and hold my heart like that? Why did God do that? Or whatever the incredible diversity of human spiritual experience is. Why did that happen? Why did it happen to me? What does it mean? Should I tell anyone that it happened? Why did I see that vision? What happened? And you know, it's really easy, I think, to put spiritual experience in the past or in other places and say it happened to people in the Bible, and it doesn't really happen anymore. That is completely untrue. That is completely untrue. There are people in this room who, probably all of us in some way, have powerful spiritual experiences, and it's so important in our journeys to recognize that, to claim that, and to be a community of people who can share that. Because there's can be fear and a feeling of being lost and not knowing why it happened or what it means. And that's the quest that it sends us on. We go kind of searching. We make our way to Inlet United, or we go on an 8-day silent retreat, or we just go looking, you know, or we search our hearts. And that's the second step in the journey. And then a third step comes. And I'm just walking around the points of the labyrinth here, the labyrs, right? These are called labyrs. Labyrr means axe. And these axe-shaped things are called labyrinths. That's why it's called a labyrinth. Do you see what I mean? These little shapes right here, they look like axes. If you put the handle through here, they look like axes. And that's why it's called a labyrinth. And the third point, a powerful turning point in the journey can come when we find what I call authentic spiritual practice. It's when we find something we can practice every day that connects us with that spiritual experience that we had. And this is a very hardcore thing. Sometimes we think of spirituality as kind of nebulous or soft or something, but I think almost all of us in our journeys go through some bumps and have some fear and some storms to face, don't we? The storm itself could be that spiritual experience, but we meet the storms and we learn about those storms that the more still we can be in the inner storm, the better we can sail into that outer storm. Every sailor knows that. When the wind is howling and the waves are going and the boat is flying, you want to be very cool and you want to know what you're about. And the more still you are, the more you can experience the ecstasy and the joy and the power of sailing with that storm. And so that's a really powerful turning point. And then we find that spiritual practice. We find that quiet time or that meditation or that walking the labyrinth or that singing practice or that community. What's that?
Going there.
Going there.
Nature.
Yeah, being in time in nature. That is, I think, we can't do it without that. We can't do it without that time in nature, really. We can't find that strong place inwardly. And that gets us to this fourth point. It gets us to transformation. It changes us. It takes us away from the place we were in, that we were born in, where we just fought for survival all the time. That God gave us that tremendous gift of that powerful ability human beings have to fight for survival. We're born with that. And that's our first beginning spiritually. And it is spiritual. But once we get to this place of recognizing spiritual experience, following our quest that our heart leads us on, finding that spiritual practice, that gets us to transformation, and we begin to have access to those higher spiritual capabilities that we know are in us. Our bodies know that. Our hearts know that. We know that about ourselves and about each other. We have those higher spiritual capabilities, and it transforms us, and it takes us to places we maybe didn't think we could go. You know, we didn't think we'd be able to. And it can, to start again, that transformed place can lead us to more spiritual experience, or to re-experience the crisis that's got us started at a different level in a transformed way, or all kinds of versions of it. But it begins to kind of spiral. We have more spiritual experience. We know how to quest. We begin to know more and more what authentic spiritual practice is. We get to transformation. We begin to learn what I call a sort of new default. We eventually don't go back to that fear-based way, survival-based living. We begin to live the risen life, to use Jesus' term, right? We start to no longer fear the things we feared. You know, they can happen. We get to eternal life. Which doesn't mean a clock time life extended indefinitely. Eternal life in the New Testament means life in the present, always. It means outside of clock time, just living in the now. So one way of thinking about that. So that's that model that I just shared with you. That is something that comes from my book that I've written, an as yet unpublished book called Still the Storm. And there's a couple of things about what authentic spiritual practice is. You know, we could talk about this a lot, but there's a couple of points that I think are essential. There's time in nature is a piece of it. And, you know, you might think, well, that's kind of a New Age now thing that people talk about now. But it's all over the gospel. Jesus and the disciples are always getting into the boat. They're always walking everywhere. You know, walking, I have come to think, walking is doing what Jesus did. He walked everywhere. And if we start doing that, walking everywhere, we kind of get to a relationship with place and with time and presence that can really connect us to that transformed self. And there's two essential elements of authentic spiritual practice. There's solo practice. We can't do without that. And there's community practice. And it's the two. Sometimes most of us prefer one or the other, or many of us prefer one or the other, the solo time or the community time, but it's really both. We need both. And they're kind of poles of the practice. True, authentic spiritual practice empowers us in everything we aspire to in life, everything. Not just in church, not just in spiritual practice. Authentic spiritual practice is empowerment, spiritual empowerment. It gives us much more of our own resources to bring to bear in our activities. And as I've said, it gives us access to those fruits of the Spirit, those higher spiritual capabilities. And a missing piece for Christians often is the body. There's a lot in the way we have been in recent times among Christians that takes us away from the body. Sometimes I think we have this shame about the body or something, but true spiritual practice brings into wholeness all parts of us, including our bodies. And, you know, maybe that's where the walking practice comes in. Our bodies are built to walk. It's there when you start to think how we're designed. We're not really designed to sit in chairs a lot. We're designed to be upstanding and walking and moving. And that missing piece of a spiritual practice that connects us to our bodies, that's what this labyrinth is all about, right? It's contemplative, prayerful walking prayer. And again, you might think it's a recent innovation. That's not true. The Chartres labyrinth goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. The idea of pilgrimage is ancient, predates Christianity, really. These things are ancient. Some if those of you who are meditators like I am, I'm a long time daily meditator, that might, when I initially started, I thought that was some new angle. It's not. It's foundational. The desert Christians, the earliest Christians, wrote about it in great detail and practiced it in a very profound way. It's intrinsic for Christians. So anyways, that's my brief conversational way of talking about what I call the spiritual compass. It's that's what I call it in my book, the spiritual compass. It's just, I hope, will help us find our way to some of the fixed points that we all share in on our journeys. And I think we're going to sing a little bit of The Road Behind Me is the Wind to wrap that up. Because, of course, this song, The Road Behind Me is the Wind, I wrote it, I can actually take you to this certain block under a certain tree on Highbury Street in Vancouver where I've been walking a long time. And those words just came into my mind. The road behind me is the wind. So here we go. The road behind me is the wind. It's a rising tide that calls a sailor in. Darkness or dawn, you know, you'll walk the road you're on. Once you know the road, behind you is the wind. Darkness or dawn.